Today I'm going to be covering 4 production techniques that Kenny Beats uses in his beats that you may want to think about using in your own.
I don't trust no bitch with my government. Fuck a friend. I don't want no friends with no open hands. Count my bands all alone at home. Don't you call my phone. Everyone that I ever.
And one of the most impressive things about Kenny Beats, in my opinion, is the amount of detail and work that he puts into his arrangements. I don't think I've heard a single beat of his where it's just a plain 2-bar loop repeating the same thing over and over again. You can tell when you watch his beat making streams that he puts a lot of emphasis on his arrangements. I think in general this is a great idea for many producers to think about with their own beats as well. But there is a very important idea that you need to think about before even arranging, and it has to do with a decision that's made at the very beginning of the beat making process, which is sample selection. Picking a good sample or a bad sample is going to be a key decision that will either allow or restrict a lot of possible arrangement techniques and ideas that you'll be able to do. So for instance, with this beat that I made here that you heard in the intro, you can hear we have the main loop right here, but later on in the beat, we have the hook section where we have some additional instrumentation that comes in on top of this main loop right here. As well, I also have a bridge that I built in this beat as well. Now, all of this was built using one sample. And what a lot of producers don't think about is whether or not the samples that they choose will allow them to do all of this. With the loop that I used, which is from one of my YouTube viewers named 13, he's an amazing loop creator, and I've included his contact info in the description if you're interested in working with him. But you can see the sample has many different sections where instruments come and go, and the music changes over time. There's just a lot of material that we can work with here. This is exactly what allowed me to build all the different sections of my beat, my main loop, my hook, and my bridge. I just used different parts of this sample. So for example, for the hook, I used this part that was a bit more dense here. And the same thing with my bridge. I did a bit more of an advanced technique where I took this one part of the sample right here. And I split this one section out amongst 2 different layers. As you can see, the first layer I added halftime to it. And the second layer right here, what I did was I pitched this up 12 semitones, as you can see right here. And then I added shaper blocks to alter its rhythm. And at that point, what I did was I controlled the frequency distribution of both of these layers. I reduced the low end of the halftime portion, and you can see here I made a cut in the low end right here. And with the pitched up layer, you can see I reduced some of the high end. And the reason why I did this is because now there will be a bit more continuity between the bridge and the normal loop, since they sit in a more similar frequency area. This section just won't feel quite as jarring when it transitions back into the normal loop. This is an idea that I showed you guys in a video that I made a long time ago where I covered 7 different techniques that you can use when you use loops to build better arrangements. The link to that video is in the corner. And often you'll notice with Kenny Beats, when he chooses a sample, he will often choose one that allows for a similar level of flexibility that gives him a lot of material to build out the many different sections of his beat. And this is one of the problems that comes up when producers instead choose loops like the one that I have here, for example. Now, by no means am I saying this is a bad loop. It does sound great, but it just doesn't offer as much material that we can work with. Not only that, the sample itself is just a lot more dense. We have a lot more instrumentation here. The amount of sampling techniques that we'll be able to use and our ability to manipulate the sample will just become far more limited now. This is the idea of sample malleability that I bring up often for those who've been watching my channel for a while now. So that's one of the concepts that you will want to consider, which is sample selection. By the way, if you guys enjoy my videos, hit the like button, subscribe, do all that good stuff. If you ever get tired of my videos, you can just stop watching and unsubscribe. It really does help my channel out though. Next, beyond that, when it comes to arranging, one of the things that I also really like about Kenny Beats' arrangements is his attention to detail and the smaller ideas that occur throughout his beats. For example, with the beat that I built here, you can see that throughout I drop drums, I change the rhythm of different patterns at times. I include small little variations throughout the beat like this. As well, you'll see that I have these short little samples that come in and out at different times during the beat as well. This is similar to what I covered in a video a while back about adding instances throughout your beat. These little switch ups and instances are things that you'll commonly hear within Kenny Beats' production, and it's just a great way to break up the monotony of a beat. This is just yet another technique that you can think about if your beats start to feel boring and repetitive. These smaller ideas can go a long way in helping your beat just sound more engaging over time. Next, stepping away from arranging and looking at some actual core ideas, one of the things that I've noticed about Kenny Beats' production has to do with the rhythms of his beat. Very seldom in his beats will I hear a straightforward hi-hat pattern on every 8th or 16th step, for example. He goes the extra mile to make sure that the rhythms of his beats are more varied. And I know for me personally, I can definitely be guilty of just overlooking the hi-hats and just coming up with something a little bit more basic and then moving on to other things that I just may find more fun. But being a bit more detailed with your hi-hats can be a great means of helping your beats. Especially with this beat that I've built here, you can hear with this loop that I've chosen, we have those chords playing on every beat. The sample here has a very straightforward rhythm, so if I were to use all of my other elements and have them play with the same straightforward rhythm as well, the beat might not end up being all that interesting. Which is why I built this hi-hat pattern with all these small stutters in it, and I drop notes here and there as well. We have a pattern here that just isn't as straightforward. This is just helping my beats sound more interesting in this particular situation. Even with my 808 pattern that I've built here, you can see I have a section in my pattern where I switch up to a triplet rhythm. Not only that, Kenny Beats will also include multiple percussive elements in his beats oftentimes to, again, just go that extra distance with the rhythmic layers in his beats. So instead of just adding a clap on the 2 and the 4 and calling it a day, for example, he will often include more smaller percussive sounds, maybe some additional snares and hi-hats and pick spots throughout the beat to add these percussive elements. It's exactly what I did here with this percussive layer and this one. I also have a secondary layer of hi-hats right here. This again helps create more variation in the rhythmic sections of his beats. So taking your normal rhythmic elements in your beats and going that extra distance is something that I will commonly see in Kenny Beats' production. It's just a good idea to do when the situation calls for it. Now the last thing I want to cover has to do with his 808 patterns. When Kenny Beats goes more towards making hip-hop tracks, I notice that at times he'll get a lot more melodic with his 808 patterns. So instead of coming up with a straightforward 808 pattern like this that very strictly follows what the sample's doing, he likes to use his 808s to add a little bit more musicality to his beats, again, if the situation calls for it. With my sample that I'm using here, it's not a very melodic one, it's very straightforward. So this would be a great opportunity to use my 808s more melodically. You can see I have many different 808 patterns that I am using throughout the different sections of my beat. But you'll notice that with all these 808 patterns, I don't just strictly follow the chord progression of my sample and leave it at that. I use many different notes that cover a wider span, rather than just use the same notes over and over again. Now I do want to mention that if you're an FL Studio user and you want to try to create some very elaborate and intricate 808 patterns, it's going to be very, very helpful to use Directwave. This is a stock plugin that comes with FL Studio, and using it will just allow you to have far more control over your 808s and help you build better patterns. This is something that I covered in a video about 808s a while back. So instead of repeating myself, I'll just link the video for you to watch. It should be showing up on the screen right now. It's a great video if you want to learn some cool 808 tricks, as well as how to use Directwave for better 808 patterns. So those are 4 Kenny Beats production techniques that you can think about using in your own production. I hope you learned some ideas that you can start using in your own beats. If so, like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. Head over to betterbeatmaker.com if you need some more advanced help with your beats. My free drum kit's available in the description box below, as well as a link to the Discord if you want to join my producer community, and I'll see you guys next time.